Hello ladies and gentlemen and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host, Brett Murphy, and for today's video we are going to be doing something a little bit different for the channel. Today I'm going to be revealing my favorite movie from every genre. So my good buddy Josh, aka the Movie Apprentice, tagged me in a challenge in one of his recent videos. And that video was the best of 10 tag, as he called it, wherein he would give his 10 favorite movies from 10 different genres. One movie for each genre. So I figured if I'm gonna do it for 10 genres, I may as well do it for all of the genres. Sort of a go big or go home type of situation. And before we get into the real content of the video, I just wanted to point out that Josh also tagged a handful of other content creators. A group of people who I have become very close with over the past couple years that I've been on this platform. Those being Trivial Theater, Ashley from the Movie Oracle, Ren Geekness, Rio's Positive POV, and Larry from LC Screen Talk. I highly recommend you go check out each and every one of their channels, as they will be linked down below. For they are each exceptional content creators in their own right, and believe it or not, even more amazing people. Now with all that being said, let's hop right into things. So we will be going in alphabetical order for our genres, and that means first up to bat is the action genre. Now this one was super tough because action is a genre that I grew up watching the most. I love 80s action, I love 90s action, and there have been some fantastic modern action films as of late. Some others I considered were The Raid 2, Mission Impossible Fallout, Aliens, because yes, it is an action movie. And the top two that were closest to getting that #1 spot were Die Hard and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. But the movie that I will be giving the spot to as my favorite action movie has got to be Mad Max Fury Road. 2 words to describe why this is my favorite action movie of all time. Practical effects. Okay, it's not just because of the practical effects, obviously. But the practical effects do play a huge role in it for me, as most modern action films rely very heavily on CGI. And it is reported that this movie was roughly 80% or more practical effects, really only using green screen to widen the landscape, make it a bit bigger and a bit cooler looking, as well as using CGI doubles, that way stunt actors didn't actually get killed in the process. The story for this movie is extremely simple. It's basically an escort mission, but what you go in for is the action, and boy oh boy does it deliver. Some of the biggest, best, most mind-boggling and epic action I have ever seen. And on top of its bombastic action, this movie also has some of the most exceptional production and costume design that I have ever seen. Not to mention, Immortan Joe has got to be one of my favorite modern day villains. And next is the adventure genre. Now the definition of an adventure movie is a little loose, as action and adventure often get put together. But for me, I just included movies that give you that sense of adventure, that make you want to go out and just explore. Some of the movies I considered were a bit small scale, like Stand By Me, and then the complete other end of the spectrum, like Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. And I was stuck between these 2 movies for getting this spot, but the runner-up has got to be Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think it is the perfect adventure movie. I really think it is the definition of an adventure movie, and I think Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones is the perfect hero. But who is going to be getting this spot is 2005's King Kong. This movie is one of my favorite movies of all time, top to bottom. I have no issues with the runtime. The CGI, for being, 16 years old now, holds up extremely well. I love the story, I love the cast, I love the tie-in video game. I adore everything about this movie, and I really never understood any of the hate for it. And next on the agenda is the animation genre. Now really, I could have honestly placed just about any Pixar movie here. I love all 3 of the How to Train Your Dragon movies, the recently released Klaus or Claus, however you decide to say it, the Netflix Christmas movie I absolutely am infatuated with. Wreck-It Ralph is another one that easily could have taken this spot, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is probably the best animated movie of the last decade. But for my pick, we are going to be going back a couple decades, way back to 1995, for my favorite animated movie of all time, Toy Story. I have no words to describe my love for Toy Story. It is in my top 10 of all time, easily. And without a doubt is my favorite animated movie of all time. Again, you'll hear me say this a lot, I love the story, I love the characters, I love the messages that are both there for kids and adults. The humor lands with me every time, and this might be the movie that I've rewatched the most in my life. I have owned it on VHS, I've owned it on DVD, Blu-ray, and now 4K. I really will never be able to get enough of Toy Story. And next, we are going to be looking at the biography genre. Now, this was a really tough one. Again, sort of like adventure, biographical movies, the definition is pretty loose because a lot of the time, a lot of it is really over the top, really Hollywooded up. You know, it's all about the glitz and glamour, making it approachable for general audiences. Some others that I considered for this one were The Wolf of Wall Street, Goodfellas, and the one that I originally had in this spot until I switched it at the last second was Straight Outta Compton, because that movie is spectacular. But who will be getting this spot is Catch Me If You Can. Again, like I just said with the definition about the biographical genre being fairly loose, I'm not quite sure how much of this is actually truth and how much of it was added for the sake of it being a movie, but it is very much so based on a true story. One of my favorite Leonardo DiCaprio performances, one of my favorite Tom Hanks performances. The movie is just absolutely undeniably exceptional. And next, let's sit back, kick our feet up, and have a laugh with the comedy genre. And I am a huge comedy fan. I'm really not picky with comedies at all. I love dark comedy, I love stupid comedy, I love slapstick comedy, I love satirical comedy, I love gross out comedy, I love comedy in general. I will laugh at anything. Give me Jim Carrey, give me Adam Sandler, give me Seth Rogen, I will laugh. A couple other movies that I considered giving this spot to were any of the Cornetto trilogy, being Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, or The World's End. I love all three of them very equally. 21 Jump Street I think is laugh out loud hilarious. Zombieland is one of my favorite zombie movies and one of my favorite horror/comedy movies, I guess dark comedy. Step Brothers is a great example of my love for stupid comedy, but I will be giving this pick to Ben Stiller's 2008 Tropic Thunder. An all-star cast. I mean, with your three leads being Ben Stiller, Jack Black, and Robert Downey Jr., how can you go wrong? Having a bunch of A-list actors going so hilariously over the top in a satirical comedy that pokes fun at all of the issues that fill Hollywood to this very day. It's hilarious, the action is actually surprisingly good, the cast has insane chemistry, and this movie is packed to the absolute tippy top with quotable moments. And now let's go to what is likely the toughest genre on this list, me being a huge comic book movie nerd, is the comic book genre. Now, I really tried to be very careful with this pick. I didn't want to just say a bunch of MCU movies either, because even though I love the MCU, I didn't want to sit here and list a bunch of those as potential picks. So I really tried to think a bit more outside of the box on this one. The three that almost got the spot were Edgar Wright's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which I think is criminally underrated. Logan, which was the perfect swan song to both Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Sir Patrick Stewart's Professor X. Avengers Endgame, because it's Avengers Endgame, that movie's in like my top 3 of all time. Sure, call it fan service the movie if you want. That's what I'm here for. I adore that movie. But what I will be giving the spot to is, surprise, surprise, The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight to me is the perfect movie, like quite literally the perfect movie. I don't have any issues or flaws with it at all. Of course, most people go to watch this movie now for Heath Ledger, but I really don't think that people should sleep on Christian Bale once again returning as Bruce Wayne/Batman, Aaron Eckhart as Two-Face, Gary Oldman as Commissioner Gordon, Michael Caine as Alfred. The set pieces in this movie are grand, the action hits hard, the storytelling is marvelous. It really is a perfect movie. And next is the crime genre, and again, crime it's a very loose definition. But when I thought of this, I thought more so of like organized crime movies and less about like murder movies and things like that. The three that almost stole that top spot were Scarface, Goodfellas, and The Departed. But who will be taking that top spot is The Wolf of Wall Street. This is my favorite Leonardo DiCaprio performance. Sure, the movie's 3 hours long, but you will not feel it. Jonah Hill probably should have won Best Supporting Actor. Jon Bernthal was great in it as well, even with his limited screen time. This was Margot Robbie's breakout role. The way that Scorsese approached this movie is exactly why it's my favorite out of all of his filmography. I love that Jordan Belfort can both go from telling the story off screen to looking directly into the camera, to it being a much bigger, grander crime thriller. It's got quite a bit of comedy in there too that always cracks me up. I really do love everything about this movie, and that's why it is my favorite movie from so many of the people involved with it. And next is the drama genre. Again, like many others on this list, you can look at drama 110 different ways. A few of the others that almost stole that top spot were 12 Angry Men, the original, The Social Network, The Truman Show, American History X, and Whiplash. But the one that has got to take the cake is The Shawshank Redemption. I mean, it's IMDb's top-rated movie of all time based on user score for a reason. What is there left to say about this movie that hasn't already been said a million times? All I can say is that it's my favorite drama flick for a reason, and if by some chance you haven't already seen it, definitely give it a watch. I highly recommend it. Next up to bat is the fantasy genre. I will say it time and time again, the definition for fantasy is fairly loose, like some may consider Star Wars fantasy, but I do not. I am more so think of fantasy like dragons and witches and wizards and spells and all this other kind of stuff. You know, like mythology type things like Greek mythology, Norse mythology, that's all fantasy to me. That being said, you could technically count Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, because there are definitely fantasy elements in there. Really, any of the Harry Potter movies could have stolen this spot, myself being a massive Harry Potter fan with The Prisoner of Azkaban being my favorite. Or any of the Lord of the Rings films. Actually, speaking of the Lord of the Rings films, my spot is actually going to go to Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. But it just as easily could have gone to Fellowship or The Two Towers. Return of the King is just the definition of epic. It's the culmination of a massive journey. I'm talking like hours and hours. I mean, even the theatrical cuts of the first two movies are 3 hours each, so you're talking about 6 hours to get to this point, and then this movie is insanely long. And if you're talking about the extended editions, which in my mind is the only way to watch these movies, then you're even for an even bigger, grander, epic, more badass, amazing journey than the theatricals. There really is no journey out there like The Lord of the Rings. And there is no bigger epic finale than The Return of the King. Yeah, it won all of those Oscars for a reason. Next up is the horror genre. Now, the horror genre has got to be one of my favorite nowadays. Growing up, I was a major scaredy cat, but over the past couple of years, I've fallen completely in love. What I love about horror is that no horror movie is really like any other. There definitely are similarities between a lot of them, same vibes, maybe same director, cast, etc. But what I love the most about the horror genre is that there are so many subgenres. You have slashers, you have the paranormal horror, you have art house horror, you have torture porn, you have action horror, you have sci-fi horror. There really aren't any other genres that have this many subgenres. There is just so much variety. For the longest time while preparing for this video, I actually had Dr. Sleep in that #1 spot. Because I think that us sleeping on this movie while it was in theaters was an absolute crime. Because I think it's damn near perfect. Speaking of Dr. Sleep, another one that almost got this spot was its predecessor, The Shining. The Conjuring is my favorite fun-to-watch scary movie. It's the one that I probably watched the most on this list. The original 1979 Alien was also very close to taking that spot. And Jordan Peele's Get Out was this close. But the spot has got to go to John Carpenter's Halloween. Speaking of John Carpenter, The Thing was also very close. The movie was made on a shoestring budget. It starred a then unknown Jamie Lee Curtis, was directed by a then unknown John Carpenter. This movie had every right to fail and fly completely under the radar of general audiences. But instead, it rose to the occasion, was absolutely adored, and is now a classic. This is my favorite comfort horror movie out there. And now, every single Halloween ever since I first saw this movie, I am sure to watch it. I wait till all the trick-or-treating is done, the fireworks are finished, I get in some comfy clothes, I pop in my Blu-ray disc, and I grab a bucket full of candy and just love life and forget about everything for an hour and a half. And there is no other movie in this genre that could do that for me. Next is the musical genre. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because I don't love musicals. I really don't like many of them. I enjoyed La La Land, and I really seriously considered giving this spot to The Greatest Showman because I just love Hugh Jackman. He's the only reason I went to see the movie, and I actually really enjoyed it because of him. Plus, the songs are insanely catchy. But this is a movie that I didn't even expect to be a musical when I went in to see it. And it is someone that I have been listening to their music all my life, and that is the Elton John biopic, Rocket Man. Yeah, Taron Egerton killed it and was absolutely robbed at the Oscars. He's exceptional. The music is exceptional. He sang all of the songs himself. The set design, wonderful. The costume design, magnificent. If you're even just a little bit of a fan of Elton John, this is a must-watch. Next is the mystery genre. Now, I know a lot of people put mystery and thriller together. They say it's a mystery thriller, but I've decided to separate them up for this video. The difference being that I find thrillers often have more horror elements, where mystery is more so about the mystery. Some mystery movies that almost snuck their way into the top spot were Gone Baby Gone, Wind River, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and Knives Out. But who will be taking this top spot is Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners. This was Hugh Jackman's best performance in my eyes until Logan came out. But even then, I would say it's probably tied for his best. And to me, it is probably also Jake Gyllenhaal's second best, his first being Nightcrawler. This movie has such a simple story. Two little girls get abducted, an angry father, Hugh Jackman, is out on the look, and alongside him is a detective who specializes in this field. This could have been a very dull, very boring, very simple movie, but with Denis Villeneuve's direction and the powerhouse cast, it instantly became a must-watch classic and my favorite mystery film. Calling all you lovebirds, this next genre is the romance genre. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of romance movies either. I really don't care for many rom-coms, and obviously every movie has romance in it somewhere, but I'm talking about movies where their central theme is romance. And I only have two honorable mentions for this genre that almost stole that top spot, and those were Lost in Translation and the recently released Bradley Cooper directed A Star Is Born. But who will be taking this top spot is James Cameron's Titanic. Wow, I have mentioned Leonardo DiCaprio a lot on this list. I mean, he's my favorite actor, so if you didn't know that, it all makes sense now. It really is a tale as old as time. No, it's not Beauty and the Beast, it's the Titanic, considering that the Titanic sank in 1912. Seeing how it is based on a real-life event, it could have been put in the biographical category, but the whole Rose and Jack plotline was completely made up for the sake of the movie. And I am completely okay with that because this is one of the few romance movies that I actually absolutely love to watch. Sure, it's a bit longer than most general audiences like, never mind, I guess. Although the funny thing to me is this really could have just been like a random romance movie and it still could have been the exact same because the whole Titanic disaster and the sinking and everything like that completely takes the backseat to the romance. But I'm not complaining, it's an amazing movie. And next is the science fiction, aka sci-fi genre, and actually scratch that about the comic book movies being the hardest. This was likely the hardest because the sci-fi genre is my favorite. There's just so much you can do in the sci-fi genre. It is quite literally limitless. As far as your imagination can go, the science fiction genre can go even further. So I really had to work hard to narrow this honorable mention list down to because I could have just sat here and listed off like 100 movies. But the three that were the closest to taking that top spot were Blade Runner 2049, Inception, and Interstellar. But in order to find out who gets this spot, we're gonna have to go back to the future. Yes, because my pick for the sci-fi genre is Back to the Future. Many people could argue that this is more of a drama, more of a comedy, maybe it's an adventure movie, and I think it really does fit into all of those genres. But I think you're forgetting the main point of the plot, and that is that DeLorean with a flux capacitor in the back seat. Yeah, hate to break it to you if you don't think this is a sci-fi movie, but time travel is very much so sci-fi. If I were able to go back in time and count, it's either going to be Toy Story or this one as the movies I've watched the most in my life. And for good reason. Although I do prefer some movies to this in terms of quality of the movie, I've just seen this movie far too many times and am way too in love with it to not give it the top spot. And next up in the batter's box is the sport genre. I grew up all my life playing sports and I still love to play sports whenever I can, so I do have a soft spot for the genre. And because of that, I wanted to show it a little bit of extra love and I gave it another couple of honorable mentions. A couple that almost stole this top spot were Moneyball, Creed, Rocky, The Fighter, Ford v Ferrari, and the one that was so close was 42, R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman. But who will be taking this spot is a mixed martial arts brotherly love flick, Warrior. This movie is spectacular. The drama in it is nearly unmatched, and the MMA matches are actually quite convincing. Tom Hardy, Joel Edgerton, Nick Nolte, they all give magnificent performances. It is truly both one of the most uplifting and heartbreaking movies I have ever seen. And that ending, just hits me in the feels every single time. My only real gripe with it is that the story is pretty generic, like you can start the movie and you'll know exactly where it's going. Third last has got to be the thriller genre. As I said earlier, I separated it up from mystery because I find thriller movies often have a few more horror elements to them. And the three that almost stole this spot away were Zodiac, No Country for Old Men, and The Silence of the Lambs. But who is taking this spot is Seven. I mean, just look at who you have in the two lead roles, Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. This movie still freaks me out, because it feels so grounded in reality, yet so outlandish and creepy. A killer is on the loose and killing victims who match up with the 7 deadly sins. Now tell me that doesn't make your skin crawl. If you haven't seen this movie, by some chance you're doing yourself an absolute disservice. Get on it ASAP. And second to last is the war genre. I am a huge war buff. I mean, I was the kid back in grade 5, I think, who while everyone else was reading like Judy Blume or Goosebumps or something, I was sitting there reading World War II books. So I am absolutely infatuated with this genre. Some of my favorites include The Hurt Locker, Inglourious Bastards, Fury, Hacksaw Ridge, Black Hawk Down, but I'm obviously going to have to go with the best war movie out there, Saving Private Ryan. I mean, the opening scene alone is enough to give it this top spot, so that should really tell you all you need to know. It is brutal, it is relentless, but it is also filled with so much hope and heart. The characters are truly each one of a kind, and there really couldn't have been a better pick for the leading man than Tom Hanks. Steven Spielberg absolutely put his heart and soul into this movie, and it shows. And last up today for my favorite movie from every genre is the Western genre. Now I know there are tons of old school Westerns that people are going to be screaming at me about. I know that the good, the bad, the ugly exists. I know that A Fistful of Dollars exists. I know that there are countless Western movies out there. But because there are so many in the past, many which I have seen, many which I have not, and not all of them are really my cup of tea, I decided to focus a bit more on modern Western flicks because I feel like they don't get enough love. I mean, there is a reason that the way of the Western is a very popular saying, because at one point in time, all of the biggest movies in the world were Westerns. And then they just died off, and now we see like one good Western every few years. So a couple of the honorable mentions are, well, believe it or not, this first one, but Rango. I mean, that's an animated movie that won Best Animated Picture, and it's very much so a Western. But other modern Western flicks that deserve more love are the remake of True Grit and the remake of 3:10 to Yuma. But who will be taking this top spot is my favorite movie of all time, and yes, believe it or not, even though I don't love Westerns, my favorite movie of all time is a Western, and that is Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained. This movie was snubbed for Best Picture. Don't even talk to me. This movie was snubbed. And surprise, surprise, there's Leo again, hiding in the background. But I mean Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz, Kerry Washington, Samuel L. Jackson, Walton Goggins. This movie is packed with an all-star cast. It has every Quentin Tarantino trademark you can think of. It's got the quick, witty dialogue, the dark humor, the over-the-top, extremely violent shootouts. It's hilarious, it's brutal, and exceptional in every sense of the word. And again, with it being my favorite movie of all time, I think it is perfect, completely flawless. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments what you think of each of my picks for my favorite movie of every genre. And please, I implore you to let me know what your favorite movie of every single genre is down in the comments. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe. Thank you so much for watching. And that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you. And while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.